It is my pleasure to welcome here the next speaker, Tomaš Foltýnek, who works as a lecturer at Masaryk University. He is specialized in theoretical informatics, cryptography, algorithms, and information technologies. His research interest is plagiarism detection, prevention, and academic integrity. This interest made him also a representative of the Czech Republic in the Pan-European Platform for Ethics, Transparency, and Integrity in Education at the Council of Europe. He has been involved in studying plagiarism and academic ethics since 2008, and he helped to set plagiarism detection system at Mendel University in Brno. He is also a chairman of the European Network for Academic Integrity. And this all makes him a good person for providing us examples of specific cases and their consequences, namely for the trust in science. He will discuss the causes of academic misconduct and measures that can be implemented to prevent it. Tomáš, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for a very nice introduction. So you basically mentioned all my background. Yeah, so I have been involved in several projects that were focused on plagiarism, and namely for policies of plagiarism, the projects that were funded by the Council of Europe, and later served as a basis for the recommendation to member states of the Council of Europe, which is now being drafted and it's almost finalized, the recommendations on combating the fraud in education. This presentation draws from my experience in this project, in these projects, and I have to say that my main integrity issue is plagiarism, and I'm more interested in educational integrity rather than scientific integrity. But as we know, in academia, education and science are interconnected. So even though the issues might be slightly different and the ways how to address these issues might be slightly different, the basic principles are the same. So what I'm going to talk about, I will briefly talk about three cardinal sins in science: fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. I will talk about consequences and causes of scientific misconduct and how can we prevent these types of misconduct. And as a main preventative measure, I will talk about building a culture of academic integrity. First, to clarify the terminology, so throughout this lecture, whenever I say academic, I mean educational and research. In academia, education goes hand in hand in research, so I perceive research integrity as a subset of academic integrity as well as educational integrity. And also, from the negative point of view, academic misconduct involves educational misconduct and research misconduct. The terminology is not really clear. Some people perceive it in another way. So academic is often perceived as educational only, putting research integrity on research misconduct aside. But I understand this both research and educational integrity as a subset of academic integrity. So just to make it clear. So what is academic integrity? When I want to explain, for example, to my friends what is my research topic, and I say academic integrity, they ask what it is about. So the easiest way for me to explain is that it is not cheating. So, and also when you go to news servers, to media, the negative approach is really typical. The perception that academic integrity is no exam cheating in education, no plagiarism, no scientific misconduct. It's how academic integrity is widely understood in society. And also, a reactive approach to academic integrity is quite typical. So when institutions want to deal with academic integrity, their main motivation or main approach is prevention of cheating, prevention of plagiarism, prevention of other forms of misconduct, and prevention of scandals. Let's stay for a while with this negative approach, and let me talk a bit about three cardinal sins which scientists may commit, known as FFP. The acronym stands for Fabrication, Falsification, and Plagiarism. Textbook example of data fabrication is Diederik Steppel, former dean and professor of social psychology in Tilburg University in the Netherlands. The scandal happened some time ago, and there were some measures how the society, particularly scientific society, learned from this scandal. So this is the case which is used as an example. How can we explain the causes and the measures that were taken afterwards? Professor Steppel's methodology was developed through the time to the way that he always designed an experiment, designed the hypothesis, methods. It was a social psychology, so he relied on some questionnaires for people, and then pretended to conduct that experiment. But he actually never conducted such an experiment. He fabricated all data to support the hypothesis, and then published a nice paper, finished a nice project, and everything worked as he predicted. All the hypotheses that he said were proven. So the world was nice until his colleagues find some doubts and expressed these doubts publicly. And in 2011, it was a huge scandal when it that shocked the whole Netherlands. So the scientific community found out that it was all fraud, that he fabricated all the data. And it was not the problem of himself as a person. It was not a problem of his university. It was the huge scandal that led to loss of trust in scientific community and in science as a whole. But on the other hand, it was also the opportunity to set up processes that significantly improved quality of science. And now the Dutch institutions are leading all the efforts in the Europe to implement the codes of conduct and other measures to support scientific integrity. So this is example of data fabrication. The second cardinal sin is data falsification. I can take an example of an article of Wakefield 1998, which proved the connection between the hexa vaccine and autism. Later, this article was retracted because it was found out that the sample selection was biased. So if you take the sample selection when you have mainly the people with autism, so then it is easy to prove that whatever causes autism, and in this case it was the vaccine. The research, maybe in quotation marks, was founded by another company, by a competitor that was manufacturing alternative vaccine. But it took some time until that paper was retracted. So yeah, it took 12 years, and even though it is now 12 years, it has been now 12 years since the retraction, this paper is still alive on conspiracy servers, still fuels distrust in vaccination, and still I can say it's causing lives, because the parents who lose trust to vaccination refuse to vaccine their children, and then the diseases which could be easily prevented spread in some communities. So again, we see that the case of scientific misconduct led to the loss of trust. And trust is something which is really crucial to science. That the main purpose of science is to uncover the truth and to make advancement for the goodness of the society. And if the society doesn't trust the results of the science, then all the efforts of the scientists are wasted. And again, here we can see that it was not the consequence for the particular author or for the particular institution. The loss of trust affects whole sector. Plagiarism, there are well-known cases of plagiarism. German Minister of Defense Karl Theodor zu Guttenberg is probably the most famous case of plagiarizing politician. So he got his degree in 2007. 4 years later, there were some accusations from plagiarism. He first claimed that the allegations were absurd. Then he admitted some errors in footnotes. Well, the detailed analysis found that there were much more than some errors in footnotes. So after university withdrew his doctorates and more than 50,000 German academics called his resignation, he really resigned. And it was not the only case of plagiarizing politicians. There are more cases: Hungarian president, Romanian prime minister, Romanian minister of research and education. In Czechia, we have recent case of the minister of justice, and so on and so forth. U.S. first lady, Kazakh vice minister. There are some doubts about the dissertation of Russian president, U.S. vice president in that case. Now president in that time. Now President Joe Biden has also some case, and so on and so forth. Like basically every country has their plagiarists among the politicians. And again, what are the consequences? Romanian author Theodor Tudoroiu took the cases of famous politicians and examined how it affected the society. And he found out that citizens then perceive educational system as corrupt. All these scandals lower citizens' confidence in democratic structures and thus may represent aggressive threat against democracy. So this is his conclusion. I know that it's quite strong conclusion, but as we are talking about loss of trust, this is the consequence which loss of trust leads to. And we can generalize this to any form of misconduct. Any scandal leads to the loss of trust. It's not only plagiarism. So put these three cardinal sins together. Some researchers interested in research integrity were interested how often they happen and how severe they are. Lex Buter asked the participants of the World Conferences of Research Integrity and asked them about their subjective opinion about these three forms of misconduct, so fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. And the result was that plagiarism is the most frequent one. The fabrication is less frequent than falsification, and then plagiarism is more frequent than these two. When it comes to severity, it's vice versa. Researchers perceive data fabrication as the most severe form of misconduct, whether plagiarism is less severe. Probably that's because we have the systems, so it might be easier to identify the plagiarism than fabrication or falsification. And also, if the plagiarism is only copy, it doesn't really affect the scientific truth, whether fabrication and falsification does. Let's now look at the causes. So, in general, causes of any ethical misconduct are of three kinds and can be expressed as this triangle called fraud triangle. So first cause or first set of causes is pressure or motive. Pressure to finish a project by the deadline, pressure to get a grant, submit the grant application before the deadline, the culture of publish and perish, where researchers are evaluated based on the number of publications. So this creates the pressure to scientists, this creates the pressure to teachers at universities, pressure to students. Then there is opportunity, or at least perceived opportunity. If there is no detection for plagiarism, then it is easy to copy and paste and publish plagiarized paper. And the third set of causes is rationalization. Like if the perception is that everybody is doing it, this is the common way how to do science, then it is easy to commit the misconduct. And also the risk-benefit assessment is part of the rationalization. So I know that I'm doing something wrong, but if the perceived benefit is larger than perceived risk, I may slip to do that misconduct. As I said, my primary interest is in plagiarism, and within the project that I have been involved in, we asked, why do students plagiarize? And we asked teachers, and we also asked students. What was interesting, we got completely different views from teachers and from students. If you ask teachers, why do students plagiarize? They tell you, okay, it's easy to cut and paste, so students are lazy, so they will plagiarize. They also think that plagiarism is not wrong, and they think that lecturers are as lazy as them and they won't care. But if you ask students, you get a completely different picture. The most common reason mentioned by students is that they run out of time, they are unable to cope with the workload, so again the pressure before the deadlines, and they think that their own work is not good enough, so they feel the lack of knowledge, that they don't know how to write it properly. When we map these reasons to the sides of the fraud triangle, so in case of students, we can see that it's mostly pressure, and then there is a rationalization. When the teacher's views emphasize the rationalization and the opportunity. So it is always important to take these differences into account, and when we want to solve some issue, we have to know what the real causes are. What are the causes of scientific misconduct? First of all, we have to admit that scientists are not different from other people. So there are always temptations for shortcuts, temptations for dishonesty. Like certain percentage of people tend to get their resources dishonestly, and this is unfortunately true for scientists as well. But that's not the only reason. David Goodstein did an analysis. What are the main causes of misconduct? And he identified career pressure. He also identified that the perception that the scientists believed they knew the answer, so there were no need to actually perform the experiments. Like it's clear how it will, what the results will be. So why should I do the experiment and waste the time? And also, namely in natural sciences, where the experiments might be difficult to reproduce, this was the opportunity for data manipulation. And also, the very important reason, very important cause of scientific misconduct is lack of awareness of proper conduct, proper methodology, and some cases of misconduct happen unintentionally by the lack of knowledge. So who to blame? If there is any problem, if there is any misconduct, either intentional or unintentional, should it be the primary responsibility of the research assistant who did not evaluate its statistical data properly, or who changed some images which was later identified as misconduct? Or is it the responsibility of principal investigator who has the responsibility for the whole project? Is it the responsibility of all co-authors of a paper where this was published, because the publication guideline says that all co-authors have the responsibility for everything that is mentioned in a paper? Or the whole research group, even the colleagues who were not directly involved that, but had the opportunity to see that something wrong is happening and did not do anything against that? Head of the department who did not do proper oversight of his subordinates? Or the whole institution who perhaps did not set the processes properly? Or is it the fault of the whole system which distributes the resources based on the number of publications and thus creates the environment of pressure? The answer is not really clear, and I would say that we should blame all of them, or at least all these stakeholders take part of responsibility, at least because they will be affected by the consequences. If the society lost trust in science, it will be the problem of whole system, and it will be the problem of every single scientist because of the lack of funding, lack of trust, and so on. So how can institutions deal with it? Let's go back to Diederik Steppel's case in the Netherlands. Klaas Sietsma, who was his vice dean and then stepped in as an interim dean during the scandal, described this in his keynote address at World Conference of Research Integrity in 2017. And he described what interventions the university adopted to prevent these scandals in future. So they introduced a measure that each PhD student has at least 2 supervisors instead of 1, to have independent check that everything is going properly. All the theses are now scanned for plagiarism, which is also standard in many institutions. Then there are some psychological interventions. Official formula is read aloud publicly when doctorate is awarded. There is code of conduct, and every staff member has to sign this code of conduct and commit to follow that code of conduct. And they also introduced an independent integrity officer and research committee, so anyone who has some doubts has a place to approach. And what, in my opinion, is particularly interesting, that they introduced annual audit. There is an audit committee who every year randomly selects 20 out of circa 500 papers. They go to the researchers and audits all the data and the methodology, ask for the raw data, try to reproduce the experiment if there were some scripts run with the data, they want to rerun the scripts and so on. And then they provide some advice to researchers and to management. The aim of this audit is to improve accountability. It was difficult at the beginning to persuade the community that it was not a witch hunt, but it was an opportunity to learn. And there at the beginning, the researchers were quite hesitant. Why are you checking everything? I am not a fraudster. I did everything properly. But then they figured out that if there is a risk that someone comes to check everything, it inherently lead people to more precise procedures. They take more precise track about the methodology, and it increased accountability, increased responsibility, reproducibility, and contributed to better policies at that institution. But the important thing is that they persuaded scientists that it is not a witch hunt, but it is the measure that aims to improve quality. So back to the fraud triangle, we have to lower the opportunity, these deterrent strategies, text matching software for plagiarism detection. We have to lower the pressure, which is easy to say but difficult to implement because of the external pressures for funding. But if the institution emphasizes intrinsic motivation for the quality of science rather than the extrinsic motivation for the quantity of papers, that is something that helps. And also lower the rationalization, move the perception from like everybody is doing something wrong to nobody is doing. This is something that we don't accept at our institution, which is known as a culture of academic integrity. It is not something that you can do overnight, that you can implement by one measure. It requires systemic effort, but the examples from scientific literature about the systemic effort for plagiarism prevention show that this works, and it works quite well. Here are two examples from an Australian universities who wanted to prevent plagiarism, and they introduced a number of measures. They introduced text matching software, they introduced courses on academic writing to teach the students how to write properly, and they implemented larger educational changes. And all forms of plagiarism dropped significantly at both institutions. So the general findings from these studies are that it is always a longitudinal strategy. It has to, it requires like all stakeholders, commitment of all stakeholders, and a lot of effort and a lot of funding is needed. So in education, there is central role of assessment, and they are addressing both educational approaches to teach students, to motivate them, and also deterrent strategies to prevent and detect misconduct. This is something that can be transferred to scientific integrity as well. Address education to prevent unintentional misconduct, and deterrence to prevent and detect intentional misconduct. So back to academic integrity, and now let me to define academic integrity positively. So not as not cheating, not plagiarism, not fabrication or falsification. I can like compare it to like happy relationship between two people or happy marriage. It would not be enough if there is no cheating. It would not be enough if a husband does not beat her wife and does not spend all the money for cigarettes and alcohol. Yeah, this is simply not enough. We have to have some like mutual understanding, trust, and these positive values. And the same is true for academic integrity. So if you want to define what academic integrity is, rather than what it isn't, it is compliance with ethical and professional principles, standards, and practices that are performed both by individuals and institutions in education, research, and scholarship. And then the culture of academic integrity is individual, group, and institutional behaviors, values, beliefs, attitudes, and characteristics that are promoting and following academic integrity. And academic integrity is a crucial presumption for quality of education and quality of research. It's something that has to be fulfilled. Otherwise, we can't talk about quality. Like integrity is not it's not enough as such. Of course, there has to be quality research and quality teaching, but without integrity, there can't be quality. I know that the previous speaker talked about some resources, so let me also offer some examples of educational resources. I will talk about the resources of the European Network for Academic Integrity, so the resources which I was involved in. So if you go to academicintegrity.eu, you can find the large collection of educational materials. There is glossary for academic integrity in multiple languages. There are general guidelines for academic integrity and self-evaluation tools, self-evaluation tests for students, teachers, researchers, and also institutions. Everything is available from the NI webpage, and you can also subscribe to a regular newsletter. There have been some Horizon 2020 projects on research integrity, path to integrity, which tries to connect formal and informal methods of education. They do some awareness-raising campaigns, the discussions, organize webinars and training events. The Embassy of Good Science provides the large database of educational resources for scientists and for management. There is also a list of certified integrity trainers. So if your institution wants to do some training, you can find the people who are trained to do that. And also the project Integrity that published a blog and also other resources. And I will finish my presentation to Conference Invitation, European Conference on Academic Integrity and Plagiarism that is organized by University of Porto and European Network for Academic Integrity in May this year, both online and in person. And we have famous keynote speakers there. Teddy Fishman from the United States, Daniel Fanelli and Anna Marušić are well known in research integrity community. So, and I'm not sure if the presentation will be available, so there are some sources that I used and that I cited throughout my presentation, and that's all from my side. So thank you very much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer the questions if there are any.
So thank you very much for your presentation. And let's check the questions. And there is a question. So I will ask, what do you think about moving from internal institutional ethical committees to third-party research integrity institutions like ORI for solving cases of scientific misconduct?
I know about these ideas and about these efforts, and the main added value of this approach is to make the investigations and the judgments about the cases more objective, because sometimes solving the case within the institution might be difficult, especially when the high-profile academic of that institution, like dean or rector, is involved. So these independent bodies may provide more objective view. On the other hand, there is always the risk. No measure is perfect. So if the environment is that the institutions compete, there might be the pressure from competing institutions to to perceive or to judge the cases more severely than is necessary. But otherwise, if you are asking about my opinion, I think that this is a good idea because of objectivity.
There is another reaction. Great talk, thank you.
Thank you.
And a question. Why do students really plagiarize? Are the teachers right or the students themselves?
It depends. I think that the students are more right here. But it also depends what is the cultural environment and where, in which country you ask the students. I personally did some workshops on plagiarism, and we did these workshops in Balkan countries, in former Yugoslavia, and some students told us, well, unless there is like proper detection and severe penalties, we will always try to plagiarize. If I may cite one of the students, he said that cheating is in our blood. So only severe penalties would work. So in this case, like teachers are more right. But then 1 month later, I went to Germany to quite a good university, and I asked students like what would be the best preventative measures, and teachers and the students answered like education and support from the teachers. They have to tell us how to do that and motivate us and so on. And I was still waiting like for the sanctions for anything like the penalties, and they didn't even mention that. And so at the end I asked, and what about the penalties? And they, oh yeah, of course you need penalties, but it was not among the things that they come up with. So it depends on the culture environment.
And do you also think that there is a certain field of study that is more endangered by plagiarism, falsification, or fabrication, that is more inclinable?
I wouldn't say that it is a field of study. It's rather the educational approach. For example, the Anglo-Saxon educational approach is more prone to plagiarism because the grading heavily relies on individual assignments which the students are asked to perform at home. So the temptation for plagiarism clearly is there. In Czechia, where the grades are mostly depending on the exams, so the opportunity for plagiarism is quite lower. And also, if the assignments or theses are more practical, so there is the emphasis on the own experiments conducted by the students, this is something which is more complicated to copy. The chances are never zero, but if it is like theoretical work which can be conducted only from your computer, from your desk, and with the internet, the risk of plagiarism is higher.
We saw some examples of public personalities that have some issues with plagiarism. Once something like this is revealed, what is the best reaction? What can I do if I did a mistake in my career somewhere in the past and now someone sets the light on it? What should I do to do the best reaction?
I would say admit the mistake, if it is like real mistake, because we have seen that all these personalities at first denied the allegations and also denied that the plagiarism is even a problem, which make them ridiculous in the eyes of scientific community, and then it's one of the reasons why the people have to resign. If I remember the case of the Czech Minister of Justice, the plagiarism in her thesis was not as bad compared, for example, to Karl Gutenberg, but the statement that she made afterwards like completely disqualified her from the position of Minister of Justice, and that was the reason why she had to resign. So I would say don't lie, don't make a false statement, admit the mistake, and try to do what you can to overcome this mistake. Like everybody can make a mistake. And most of the mistakes that you can make in science should not disqualify you from scientific career for the rest of your life. But what is important is the self-reflection, admit the mistake, and adopt at least internally some measures how to not commit the same mistake again.